ensure that people were going off in different directions and weren't floundering, and align people. And Intel was great, at least when I was at the company, really to ensure that there was alignment between individual teams, groups, departments, and essentially goals were cascaded down from the top to the individual level. And I think Intel did a great job at that, but OKRs was one of the tools that were used, not the only one. And I don't know if people are fully aware of that necessarily.
Exactly. And now we're live here, and we're talking Intel, we're talking Andy Grove, we're talking OKRs. So we got a flying start here.
We're ready.
Yeah, we're ready. So for everybody that's tuning in, we'll wait a couple of minutes to get everybody settled in here. We'll do some talk about the weather here for a couple of minutes, and then we'll kick it off. If you guys who are online can please write in the comments where you're listening in from. Where are you guys listening from, Alexander and Roman?
I'm tuning in from Barcelona. So if we're talking about weather, we're finally getting some sun. It's a bit unfair. I'm not sure. The last time I've been in Stockholm, and I told you a couple of minutes ago, it was super cold. I hope it's not super cold at the moment in Stockholm.
It is.
It is. Okay, sorry.
It's been pouring all day here. It never stops. Yes, as Jörgen in the comments mentioned there.
Yeah.
But you're in the UK, Roman, and then you're usually.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I'm based in the UK, in England, Buckinghamshire. So that's roughly between London and Oxford. Not quite, but roughly. And we had mixed weather in the last few days. In fact, in the last few weeks. But today was fairly decent during the day. Not particularly warm, given that it's end of May. But just a few minutes ago, it started raining again. Good for the plants, I guess.
Great. Then we're pretty aligned, and we're ready to talk OKRs if we're aligned.
So we need the OKRs to align us. Who knows?
Exactly. Well, tell me, we were talking about Intel here before we started. Were you doing product work at Intel, or was this?
No. I was working as an analyst programmer. That was my official job title at Intel from 98 to 2000. So a good 2 years. Okay. But it was quite an interesting time for me because I was able to do quite a bit of traveling, and I was working on two major development efforts where we built a new solution, a new product for the distributor business first, and then a new supply line management application. And the first one was based on SAP, various SAP implementations that Intel had at the time. And the second one was just greenfield development, where we built everything from scratch using Microsoft technologies, component technologies. So that was really, really interesting. But there was no product management. So we were working closely with business analysts, and we were working really closely with internal users. In some cases, just kind of literally walking over to the users to ask them a question. So that was nice.
Oh, do you have any thoughts on the current mode at Intel? Do you think they will be able to do a turnaround?
I hope so. I mean, I'm probably biased, but I think Intel is. I mean, I know it's a kind of established tech company, or maybe some people might say a tech dinosaur. But I think Intel has a lot of has a lot of strength, not only financial strength, but also a lot of strength in terms of their employees and their talent. So yeah, I'll think they'll turn things around. I'm hopeful. Cool. I still have some Intel shares. So I'm hopeful.
Fingers crossed. But you've been writing for a long time. I remember back in like 2000, must have been 10s or something. I started to read your like product strategy, road mapping stuff. But
So it's been a few years. I think I wrote my first book back in 2007. That was sort of more or less a coincidence, and then started the blog around 2010. And I think I might have published my second book also in 2010. So yeah, it's been a few years. Yeah. So it's amazing how quickly time goes by. Time flies when you're having fun. I guess that's what they say.
Yeah. Do you feel like is there something that hasn't changed that much in those years? I mean, it's the same type of questions, or?
Oh, I do think things have changed. I think product management has grown as a profession in several ways. I think, first of all, we've had an influx of new people joining the profession, which I think is nice. But I think it's also changed in terms of the specific approaches, the specific methods that we use, the techniques, the tools that we use. I personally think it's changed for the better. And I think, things like Agile software development, lean management, customer development, lean startup, business modeling, just to name a few influences. I personally think they've improved the way we practice product management, we do product management, or think about all the great tools that we have available. I mean, when I started getting involved in product management, the product management tools weren't nearly as powerful as they are today. So, yeah, I think things have changed.
Great. Maybe we can start.
Let's get this party started. Welcome everybody to ProductTank Stockholm, virtual ProductTank Stockholm this time. I'm Eric. I'm one of the organizers, together with Seema, up to the right there. And today is a very special event because it's World Product Day, where we celebrate product management as a discipline and also celebrate our large product community. So there are over, I think, 50 different events going on today, from New Zealand to the west coast of the US. I think there are currently 4 or 5 concurrent events going on right now. I think in Oslo and Vienna and where's other places. But the only thing we keep in tabs of is that we lead over Oslo meetup. That's very important for us as Swedes. But if you wanna view the whole schedule, then just go over to mindtheproduct.com and you can keep yourself busy way past midnight today with the last talks going live in the US. A lot of interesting speakers. But in Stockholm today, we're going to focus on OKRs, which is on everybody's mind and favorite subject. And then we're always going to dip into product discovery, which is going to be really, really exciting. And before Seema, you will introduce the speakers here shortly. But if you want to interact with us, I mean, you're viewing on YouTube, so just anytime during the talks, just shoot any questions you might have in the comments in the chat. And me and Seema will ask them to Roman and Alexander. So just anytime. And also one last thing, last bit of housekeeping is that we're always looking for more speakers at our event. I'll paste the link here in a couple of seconds to our Google form, where if you know somebody or if you yourself feel like you want to talk at one of our meetups, just fill in the form and we'll contact you shortly. I think that's it for me. Welcome to World Product Day, everybody.
Yes, thank you, Eric. So I'm going to start with introducing Roman, although he doesn't really need that much of introduction. Everybody really knows Roman. I'm super excited. But in a nutshell, Roman is a leading product management expert specialized in digital products and agile practices with more than 15 years of experience. He's very active in teaching to product managers, product owners, advising basically everything about products, and he's helping a lot of companies building successful product management organizations. He also has written 3 books in product management, and one of them is one more book in Scrum. He also has an amazing blog. I would highly recommend everyone to just go and check on that blog. He's sharing a lot of wisdoms there and a lot of free product management tools. Today, he will share with us his gems on OKRs in product management. Roman, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Seema, and nice to be with you. So let me share my screen with you. I have prepared a few slides. Yes, so I hope you can see a title slide that says OKRs in product management. I just tried to check, but somehow couldn't kind of validate that it's really happening. So I trust I trust the tool. In the tools we trust as product people, right? So OKRs in product management. Now I have to say before I start, first of all, that I'm not an OKR expert, but I've been involved in product management for a few years. So I'll just try and share my perspective. And then I plan to talk for about 20 minutes or so, and then very much looking forward to answering your questions. So OKRs, I thought I'll start with a very brief introduction just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we all have the same understanding of what OKRs are. So OKRs, objectives and key results, that's what the TLA, the three-letter acronym, stands for, are a method for setting and tracking goals. No more and no less. So they allow us to describe goals and then understand if we've actually met and achieved those goals. And an objective really describes what is to be achieved. So what's the thing that we want to achieve? What's the outcome, the benefit that we want to attain? And then the key results, they state how we accomplish the objective, and they allow us to understand, well, if that objective has been met, has been achieved. So I thought I'll come up with a sample OKR, or at least I'll try to, one that hopefully resonates with you. So an objective for us as product people might be to increase engagement. And then the key results to see if we've succeeded with increasing engagement might be to say that daily active users are up by 20%. Also, the session length has increased by 10% on average. And then finally, the objective is achieved by the 30th of June 2021. Yeah, that's it. So from my perspective, in a way, those are OKRs in a nutshell. But it might be worthwhile reflecting on where OKRs come from. So particularly as in recent years, OKRs have seen a lot of uptake again, a lot of interest, and many companies have started to apply them. And OKRs were pioneered at Intel in the 1970s. And the gentleman you're seeing here on this slide, the late Andy Grove, he created them or played a leading role in creating them at Intel in the 1970s. And at that stage, Intel was going through a phase where the company grew rapidly, but also where they expanded, for instance, into the microprocessor business. And so as the company was growing and as their product portfolio was growing, the executive team and Andy Grove were looking for ways to align people and make sure that different people weren't just going off in completely different directions. And so a way really to align people in order to manage the growth. And this is where OKRs come in. So Andy Grove wanted to create a method that would allow him to describe hard, measurable goals. And so, at least originally, OKRs were developed from, I guess, an execution or delivery perspective to facilitate execution. Or, I was at Intel in the 1990s, and my managers talked about flawless execution. So at least back then, that was really big deal at Intel. The ability to execute. And by the way I experienced OKRs at Intel was that they were embedded in management by objectives. So OKRs were used to set personal goals that were tied to team goals, to group goals, department goals, and ultimately company goals. But I never experienced OKRs in the context of digital products or product management. So that's the background, and I thought that might be just useful to remind ourselves of that. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is talk about some product-related goals that might be relevant, because one thing is the goal-setting method, right? And that might be OKRs, but the other thing is to say, okay, what goals are really relevant for us as product people? What goals are relevant and helpful in product management? Well, and of course, the answer depends who you ask. but I thought I'd share my view, my perspective. And so I've developed a little goal hierarchy or a little goal model. And it starts with encouraging people to describe the ultimate purpose or positive change that the product should bring about. So in other words, the vision of a product. So I think it's really nice to have such a big, inspiring, or hairy, audacious goal. That ultimately, if it resonates with the stakeholders and development teams, then it offers some fundamental alignment, and it can sort of act a little bit like the North Star. So something I like, and for me, it's a big goal also in the sense of the time period that it should cover, so 5 years plus, and it might never be fully attained, and for me that's perfectly okay. So it's certainly not a measurable goal. And then based on the vision, I like to take the next step and think about, okay, what about some specific user and business goals? So what about the problem that the product should address, or the specific benefit it should create? What kind of goal should it help the users achieve? Or what's the primary job that people would hire the product for? And what are the desired business benefits? What value should the product create for the company? Is it to generate revenue directly or indirectly? Is it to save money? Is it to enhance productivity? Is it to develop the brand? All of the above. And by meeting the user and business goals, hopefully we make progress towards the vision. And I quite like to capture the vision and the user and business goals in a product strategy document, such as my, product vision board. And when it comes to the horizon of the user and business goals, the time horizon that they cover, that they look at, the maximum would be the product lifecycle stage. I mean, they might change more frequently, but certainly when you move from one life cycle stage into the next one, I would suggest that you probably want to revisit your user and business goals. And then that's kind of nice, because now we understand why people would want to use the product, and so it's the value proposition. We understand why the company would want to continue or start to invest in the product, depending on where the product is in its life cycle. But it doesn't really tell us much about specific concrete benefits or outcomes that the product should create, say over the next 12 months or so. And that's where product goals come in. So for me, a product goal describes a desired benefit or outcome that the product should create, that the product should offer. And product goals should be specific and measurable. And I generally like to capture product goals on a roadmap, on a goal-oriented roadmap or outcome-based roadmap, depending which term you prefer. And sort of the duration for an individual product goal, somewhere between 2 and 6 months, with a preference maybe on the shorter time frame. 2 to 3 months tends to be a good duration, I find. And then once I've got a product goal, I can take the final step and think about specific tactical execution-focused goals. And for me, that'd be then something like a sprint goal. Of course, that assumes that the development team that you work with, or the teams that you work with, use Scrum, a Scrum-based process. And a sprint goal then describes the benefit of a sprint. It's a short-term goal, so somewhere between 1 and 4 weeks, depending on the sprint length. Now, the nice thing about this hierarchy, this model, and I'm of course very biased here, but the nice thing is that it ties together a visionary, high-level, big, inspiring goal, the vision, with a very focused, tactical, execution-focused goal, like a sprint goal. And these goals are connected, they're linked, so they're cascading goals. So the user and business goals are either directly derived from the vision or have to be in line with the vision and support the vision. And the product goal, in the same thing, either is derived from the user and business goals. So user and business goals are broken down into a specific product goal, or at least the product goal has to support those goals and be in line. And the same is then true for the sprint goal. The sprint goal is a step towards the next product goal. But it also means that when you struggle to meet your execution-focused tactical goals, then you may have to adjust your product goal. And again, if you struggle to meet your product goals, that may indicate that there's something not quite right with your user and business goals. And if you fail to meet user and business goals, then maybe you have to revisit your vision or even let go of it. So I thought to make this a little bit more specific, I'll show you real quick, a few examples. So vision might be to help people eat healthily. It's sort of a sample vision I like to use because I hope that it resonates with you. And then from then I might choose the following user and business goals, reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and create a new revenue source. Note that I haven't really said who the target group is, what market segment I'm aiming for, or what any standout features of my product are. So I'm focusing purely here on specific user and business goals. And then I can ask myself what might be a first good step in order to meet the user and business goal I just shared. And that might be to help users understand their eating habits and acquire an initial user base. And then finally, I can say, okay, what's now a first concrete step towards meeting that product goal? And that might be to validate that users are willing to share personal information when activating the app, and essentially addressing here an activation risk. And as I said, these goals are connected. So if a sprint goal is not met, then I'll have to check if there's any impact on the product goal. If a product goal is not met, then again, I have to check the impact on user and business goal. And then finally, if these aren't met, consider if there's an impact on the vision. So far, so good. Now you might ask quite rightly, so I thought this is a talk about OKRs. So where are the OKRs? Here they are. Here are the OKRs. So I thought now that I've established and shared what I would consider useful, a useful set of product-related goals, we can try, or I can try, and capture those goals as OKRs, and then we can see how does that work. How is that? So how can we capture a product vision and strategy-related goals, user and business goals as OKRs? Is that possible? I think so. So we could start with an objective that essentially is the vision and says help people eat healthily. And then we could formulate the following key results: reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. In this case, I've included the target group for males aged 40 to 55. Oh, that's someone like me. Oh my God. So that might be the user goal. And then offer an app that measures and records sugar levels in the food, analyzes eating habits, seamlessly integrates with leading smart scales. Well, that's probably what you would expect as sort of standout features, differentiators on a product strategy as part of a product strategy description. Certainly that's what I would expect. And finally, create a new revenue source as a third key result, and that's then the business goal. Okay, now what I can do next is I can use the user and business goal in order to derive a product goal from it. So there you go. So the objective would be to help the users better understand their eating habits and acquire an initial user base. So you've heard a very similar product goal before. And then as the key results, I can say now I want to offer an MVP, and that should provide a healthy eating dashboard and integrate with leading smartwatches and fitness devices, and launch in Q1. And finally, I want to be ranked, or the app should be ranked amongst the top 15 diabetes apps 6 weeks after the launch, its launch in the Apple App Store. So assuming we offer an iOS version of our app initially. So again, I've here captured the outputs that might be necessary to create the deliverables in form of an MVP and some key features. I've added a time frame and then a success criterion in order to say, okay, how do we know that this MVP will be successful? So be in the top 15 diabetes apps. And again, I can do something similar as I did before. I can use now one of the key results and then derive a new objective from it. And thereby I'm tying different OKRs together. I'm linking them. And in this case, the sprint goal describes the objective describes the sprint goal. And as you can see, it says validate that users are willing to share personal information when activating the app. And again, there are some key results. Have a product increment ready at the end of the sprint that implements the following user stories and fulfills the definition of done. So the definition of done in Scrum essentially captures the quality criteria that product increments, or generally the product, has to fulfill. The idea is that a product increment is executable software, is tested and adequately documented, and generally can be shipped, can be released or deployed. And then conduct a usability test with 6 prospective users, and the test results of at least 4 people are positive. Yeah. So I've also said, okay, how are we going to find out that we've actually successfully validated that users are willing to share the personal information? Well, by conducting this usability test, and then 4 out of 6 people will have to respond positively. So far, so good. Now, what are the benefits then and drawbacks of using OKRs to describe product-related goals? Well, the first benefit that I can see is consistency. So if you work for a company and that company is really hot on OKRs and wants to encourage individuals and teams, groups to use OKRs, in their work, then that creates then you essentially use or you have a consistent goal setting method, and that can be very useful. So if your stakeholders and the development team members are all familiar with OKRs, then why not use OKRs to describe product related goals? The second benefit I can see is validation. So OKRs encourage us to formulate goals in such a way that we can tell if we've met those goals or not. Well, that's a little bit harder with sort of visionary and higher level strategic goals, but certainly, if you think about goals that you would typically capture on a roadmap, or benefits, outcomes you would typically capture on a roadmap or sprint goals, then I think OKRs can actually be very useful because, as I said, they encourage us to describe those goals, make those goals specific, and describe them in such a way that they are measurable, that we can tell if the goal's met or not. And then OKRs, at least in theory, allow you to create goal chain. And the way this is done within the method is that a key result becomes an objective. Now, I did manage to chain together the OKRs, but not by reusing key results as new objectives, but rather deriving new objectives from key results. So I'd say I'm not sure if that's really applicable to product management. It did play a big part at Intel, however, when I was at Intel, and I believe, one of the reasons why Andy Grove designed OKRs the way they are, because Intel really used cascading goals to align different parts of the company and align people across different hierarchies. So, for people management, that could be pretty useful. But what are the drawbacks? Well, one of the big issues I have with OKRs is that I find they're a little bit verbose and text heavy, and there is really no visualization. So again, I'm biased here, but I think one of the advances, anyway, positive developments we've seen in product management over the past 10 years or so is the creation of canvases and boards. So if you go back to one of the first canvases that we've started using in product management, Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Peigneux's business model canvas, and you look at the business modeling book, or maybe some of you've read it, and if you can remember, it contains a chapter on visualization and collaboration, and it's quite a sizable chapter. That's at least how I remember it. And so the idea that we try and make key information readily available, easily available, and easily understandable and digestible, and that we use tools and formats that facilitate, encourage collaboration, I think it's a very important one. And for me, when I look at a set of OKRs, that's okay. But if I now try, and I've tried this, capture essentially an outcome-based, goal-oriented roadmap through several sets of OKRs, or a whole chain of OKRs, a whole sequence, there's a lot of text there, and for me then processing the information becomes really quite difficult. So just certainly something to consider. And then the other thing, I know that's a little bit mean, because you can say that of any new approach or any method and any tool, but I do think to a certain extent OKRs have been overhyped and overused. So for me, the issue really is not how we describe goals. For me, the issue is choosing the right goals in product management and empowering product people to set those goals together with the stakeholders and development teams. And that's for me the issue, and not kind of saying, OKRs are great, so once everybody uses OKRs, everything will be hunky-dory. So, and I've basically started to share my summary. So, OKRs can be happily used to formulate product-related goals. I guess that's a good thing. Hooray! In case you didn't know. But as I just said, choosing the right goals for your product, I find, is more important than using a specific goal-setting method. So, I'd honestly say, if OKRs are helpful for you, the stakeholders and development teams, brilliant, go and use them. But if they're not helpful for you, why would you want to use them unless you're forced to? But if somebody forces you to do something that isn't helpful for you and your product, then again, there's something wrong. There's something not quite right in terms of respect and empowerment and trust. And then I find it's super helpful to involve the right people in selecting the goals, setting those goals. Why? Well, to leverage their expertise. It can be tremendously helpful to have someone from marketing, sales support, finance present, have somebody from the development team present who knows about UX design or about technical risks, in order then to choose the right goals and maybe sequence them. And then create a shared understanding, make sure everybody's on the same page, and also secure strong support. I find that people are more likely to accept and support decisions and goals when they are involved in the goal setting process. So if you can, I'd really encourage you to take a collaborative approach and set those goals together with the key stakeholders and development team members. And then don't allow powerful stakeholders to dictate the goals to you, and don't broker weak compromises. So if you feel that you're being forced to work towards a predefined set of OKRs, then OKRs aren't the problem. The problem is, that you don't have a choice. And that's something you need to address, and maybe do a little bit of investigation around what are the causes, what are the reasons that goals are being handed to me and I'm expected to achieve them. So thank you for your attention. I hope it was a little bit useful. If you'd like to find out more about my thoughts on not only OKRs, but product management in general, please check out my website. And if you're interested in more would like to find out more about more details about some of the ideas and concepts that I've shared, then take a look at my book Strategize, which covers product roadmaps, particularly goal-oriented roadmaps. And my book How to Lead talks about goal setting techniques, talks about collaborative decision-making, which might come in handy. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions now, but if for whatever reason your question doesn't get answered, or you've got any follow-up questions, then don't be shy and reach out to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Roman. Very interesting talk. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat, and Roman will be happy to answer them. You mentioned the kind of hype thing regarding OKRs. Why do you think they've gained so much attention in just the last couple of years? It feels like every tech-focused company is talking about OKRs. We need to implement OKRs. OKRs are great. What happened?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Eric. I'm not sure that I'm in the right position to answer it, but so all I in a way can do is speculate. And I think that the adoption, the fact that Google adopted OKRs played a big part. So that certainly helped, I think, with the spread of OKRs. And I don't think I'd really, sort of came across OKRs after I'd left Intel in 2000 until sort of, a few years ago when sort of the OKR revival started. And I was like, OKRs, really? Wow, it's making a comeback. Oh, how boring. But that's just me.
Roman, where do you think having OKRs would not be helpful? In which specific situations, if you could? Think of, because I think this is also like Agile organization and team. They think like, oh, Agile is going to come and rescue us. It's going to fix everything. But what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think maybe it's a part of our conditioning, really, at least here in the West, that we always think a new tool, a new product, a new method is going to solve our problems, rather than taking a good hard look at ourselves and asking ourselves what we have to change in our organizations, and what kind of changes we have to undergo ourselves in order to bring about sustainable, meaningful change. But that aside, for me, the biggest gripe in a way I have with OKRs is the lack of visualization, as I tried to mention earlier. So if I can capture visionary and strategic goals in a tool like, say, Ashmoria's Lean Canvas or Alexander Osterwalder's Value Proposition Canvas or my Product Vision Board, why wouldn't I? For me, these are purpose-built tools. Why would I now then kind of try and use OKRs instead, or kind of put OKRs in there and then make those tools difficult to understand and use? So for me, OKRs make a lot of sense to set business goals, and kind of help with diffusing a business strategy throughout the organization, but I'm not sure that they're super well suited to product-related goals. But ultimately, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. So, again, if it's helpful and if it makes sense, then go and use them. If they aren't helpful, well, again, I wouldn't use them. And it's just personally, speaking from personal preference, for product-related goals, I wouldn't use OKRs. So, but that's again just me.
Super, thank you so much. We have 2 questions actually.
Right.
Yes, Siavash, he has asked, is OKR agile? Well,
I guess the question is, what is Agile? And one approach, one way to answer this is to look at the Agile Manifesto. And one of the values in the Agile Manifesto is that business people and developers should work together. I think it says on a daily basis, or maybe it's one of the principles, not one of the values. I've got to watch out what I'm saying here. I'm getting everything wrong. So close collaboration. And so, if you use OKRs to clearly communicate with development teams and help align the work and help align people, then, they can be useful. Same thing is true with the stakeholders. But I think per se, OKRs are neither agile nor anti-agile. I think it very much depends on how you use them. So, this may be the last thing I'll try and say about this. If you take an agile framework like Scrum, which I think is still the dominant agile framework, Scrum follows very much a goal-oriented approach. There's a vision, the latest version, there are product goals and there are sprint goals. And again, all those goals could be captured as OKRs, if that is helpful.
Thank you. Yes, I think that answers the question. In this model that you presented, I just want to know, do you consider one OKR per sprint, or you have several OKRs per sprint?
Yeah, nice question. So I think generally it's very useful to have one goal per sprint as a rule of thumb, no matter if you describe your sprint goal as OKRs or if you choose a different approach. So a few years ago, I've suggested a different approach and offered a template to allow people to capture their sprint goals while still being clear on the outcome and still introducing some metrics. But never mind. So no matter how you capture your sprint goals, I think it's very helpful to use one sprint goal at a time. Just like the product goals that I showed, I'd also recommend using one product goal at a time. And there are a number of reasons for this. The first one is the more goals you try to reach at the same time, the harder it tends to become to understand how you're tracking and if you're making progress towards these goals and how successful you were in meeting them. And then another important reason is that working towards goal as a group of people, so with the stakeholders and development teams, creates an incentive to work together well. To collaborate. And so, if you work on multiple goals, then what tends to happen is that a group or a team, usually splits up into subgroups or subteams. So that cohesion suffers, and the synergies you get from a group of people engaging with each other and helping each other and supporting each other in order to make progress towards a shared goal, that is lost. So it's perfectly okay in my mind to, as an exception, occasionally work on several sprint goals or possibly several product goals, but generally speaking, something I'd rather avoid.
Awesome, thank you so much. We have one more question from Susanna. Shouldn't the key results always be measurable?
Should the key results always be measurable? So the objective, I think, at least traditionally, the way they were designed at Intel, an objective should be a measurable goal. And then the key results help you tell if that objective has been met, and at the same time, show what you need to do in order to meet the objective. If the key results themselves then have to be measurable, I don't know. But then again, I'm not an OKR expert in the sense that, I've been working with OKRs now for many, many years or decades on a daily basis, and I know all their ins and outs. So I was really more interested in exploring how useful are OKRs in order to capture product-related goals if we have a choice.
From my perspective, sorry if you guys jump in there and finish the with my experience working with OKRs, it can be dangerous to fall into the trap of try to make everything measurable. So it's really hard to set measurable goals, and sometimes it depends on kind of like maturity where you are in the product. I found that if you have like a product or the thing you're doing in the product is pretty mature, and you kind of you have a feel for your metrics, what you can move. Is a 20% increase in user engagement, is that like a lot, or is that few? What we usually end up with doing is more these launch key results sometimes, which are pretty can be pretty boring, just launch something without any kind of measurable impact, but it's like the first step, while other key result when working with products that are more mature, then we can be very specific about them. But it can happen if you're too trigger happy with the measurable thing, then it can land on you can overachieve by a couple 100%, or you can underachieve by by a lot. So it's a trade-off. But for me, it's always been about the maturity of where you are in order to set good goals. But setting the good targets, it's really hard to get the incentives right and everything.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very valuable observation. Thank you for sharing. And I mean, I fully agree. Not all goals can and should be measurable. So a vision, by definition, isn't really a measurable goal. I'd also say, generally speaking, it's very tricky to have higher level strategic user and business goals. Always make them measurable. And again, I fully agree with you. It'll very much depend on where you are in the product lifecycle and how innovative the product is. I mean, if you're building a brand new product for a market that you haven't served so far, it doesn't have to be a disruptive product, so the market exists, but you haven't served it. It'll be very hard then to come up with quantifiable, measurable user goals and business goals in your product strategy. What I like to suggest, however, is when you then work with specific product goals, so a specific outcome the product should create in the next 2 to 3 months, then I try and set a clear target, and that might be off. But I find that, just kind of having a target and shooting for something and seeing it more as a line in the sand that we draw rather than something that's set in concrete or in stone is useful just to understand, okay, to have something to measure against, because otherwise it can be a little bit, it can be very vague, right? It can be very vague to understand, are we making any progress? But that'll then, that'll require that the stakeholders and a management sponsor understand that it's not a hard goal. It is more like an estimate, basically, that we're shooting for. And we may be way off. It may be way too ambitious, or it may not be ambitious enough.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roman. Really appreciate it. Super interesting. And I look forward to go after this talk and just go to your website and look for all these things. Could we find this presentation somewhere, or at least some topics that are related to this from your side?
Yeah, so I mean, there's certainly some material available on my blog, which you've already kindly mentioned. So I wrote an article related to OKRs a few months back, and then I'm happy to make this presentation available on SlideShare. So.
Super, thank you. Eric, could you please copy-paste Roman's weblog address here as well? In the meantime, thank you so much, Roman. We're gonna move on to Alexander. He's the co-founder of Beyond.so. Before he founding his own company, he used to work as a senior product manager at N26 and Zing. I'm not sure if I pronounced the name of the company correctly, Alexander, but he will share. Awesome, great. He will share with us 6 pillars of continuous product discovery. The floor is yours, Alexander.
Cool. So let me quickly share my screen. Cool. Yep. So thanks for the introduction. I'm super happy to be here and being able to share some of my experiences I made at N26 over the last 2 years. Since March, as Seema already mentioned, I started my own kind of venture. Together with my best friend, we're building a social content curation platform. I come to that a bit later. And the experiences with continuous product discovery I made over the last 2 to 3 years, I would like to show you a bit of something, what the biggest problems were we were facing within our team and the companies. So N26 being a company with 1,500 people, Beyond being a company with 2 people, most of the problems we were actually facing when it comes to product discovery were quite similar. So I hope all of you can take something away from the talk, and I'm more than happy to kind of keep the discussion going after the talk. And so if you have questions, or if you just want to have a chat about product discovery, continuous product discovery in general, I'm more than happy to, if you reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter. So as you already mentioned, I'm talking about the 6 pillars of continuous product discoveries. And with 6 pillars, I mean 6 different aspects I see product discovery could go wrong, or where they could become really good and helpful for your users, but also for your company. To get everyone on the same page, and that's hopefully nothing new to anyone, what is product discovery? And if we boil it down, the product discovery is actually the part where we're deciding what we're going to deliver to our users at one point. In most companies these days, the delivery part has been quite established in terms of we're probably all of us in our teams are using daily stand-ups. We're going more and more into the direction of continuous deployment. We're using user story mapping, as you heard from Roman, with Agile and Scrum. Like we heard all of these kind of things, and in most companies, I would argue that we are pretty good on the delivery side when it comes to continuously running delivery. Where we're a bit lacking is the discovery side. Like I guess most of you have heard most of the words here. We're doing some experimentation. We're doing design thinking. We did an MVP maybe in the past, but we're not really good at making sure that these kind of things happening on a weekly basis or even on a daily basis. So in this talk, I would like to also give a bit of different perspectives on how you can make these kind of things happen on a weekly or daily basis. What we see, and I discussed a lot with other PMs in also other companies, other industries, there's still a lot of teams that are running time box discoveries where they discover a new feature, they discover a new opportunity for a couple of days, a couple of weeks. They're doing a design sprint for 5 days, very packed, very defined, and then they're stopping. They have everything defined what they want to build, and they have a filled backlog for weeks, and they start working on those items in the backlog. And during the time when they develop or when they are in the product delivery, there might come up questions like uncertainty can come up, or things that haven't been answered in the discovery. So they're always struggle with building the best possible thing for the users. And the problem there, or I was doing the same thing in the beginning, to be honest, but the problem with this is because you think that the future is predictable. Like whatever we find out in discovery, which is true today, that might still be true in a couple of weeks, which usually is not the case. And I think I can say the future is not really predictable. So what should we do instead? Or what is Marty Kagan telling us? What is Teresa Torres telling us? Like we should run product discovery in a continuous way and have the market validate our small increments that we're putting out there. What does this mean in more specifics? That's what I'm also going to share in a couple of minutes in more depth. But keep in mind, the discovery should always happen. And with discovery, I mean, it's not only talking to users, but it's like discovering new opportunities and new potential solutions within your product space or within the area of the goal that you're trying to solve. But where to start? Like I talked about the 6 pillars before that I want to share them with you. And the first pillar I want to share is usually where I start when I look at, okay, how can we make this product or this feature better for users? And that's by giving the whole product discovery a bit of structure. So the first pillar for me is having a structured product discovery. I mentioned Teresa Torres before, and by the way, she just released her book. I haven't read it yet on continuous product discovery. It's on its way. I'm really looking forward to read this, because also a lot of what I'm sharing and what I'm using in the last couple of years comes from her blog. So check it out, it's pretty good. And what I was using as a to structure my product discovery quite a lot is her opportunity solution tree, which gives you a great way of externalizing your thinking. On the other side, we do have a product kata, which has been adapted by Melissa Perry, who also wrote a really good book. You should check it out, which helps you, together with opportunity solution trees, to give the whole product discovery more context and put it in more connection to, or in a better connection to, the company goals, the vision of the company, to always kind of check back if you're still on track and if it makes sense what you're currently working on in the bigger horizon. Let's dive in a little bit into these two different ways of how you can structure a product discovery to make it more clear on what I mean by that. So if you haven't heard of opportunity solution trees, it's actually what I tried to display on the right. You have an outcome, could be an OKR, for example, Roman was talking about, could be an objective, just a goal that you want to reach. And then based on different proof that you're getting from different sources and that you're trying to put to the surface, you're defining opportunities. And these opportunities might be midterm, but also long-term. Like they're not changing all the time, but new opportunities might come up based on new things that you discover. And for each opportunity, there are different potential solutions to solve that opportunity or reach that opportunity, who then again pay into the outcome. So if we're looking at a higher level to it, the top two parts are the planning, and then the solution or potential solutions is actually experimenting. And these experiments could be a lot of different things, from running an A/B test to talking to a user to validate something. And I give a bit more examples later on. So this is one way of how you can structure your product discovery in a really good way. And I was using it for quite a while. It helps you to visualize things, talk with your team, talk with stakeholders why you're doing X and not Z. And sometimes I was missing a bit of the strategy component in here, because outcome is kind of the top level that you're discussing here. And that's why I usually bring it always into connection with the product kata from Melissa Perry, which works like you have 4 different parts. And number 1 to 3 are planning. And number 4 is experimenting. So it's quite similar to the opportunity solution tree, but still a bit from a different angle, because number 1 is like you're making sure that you're very much aligned with the company goal. Like what is the ballpark you can play in? What is your area? So you need to at one point always kind of look back at what's the product KPI that you want to increase or decrease, what's the future state that you want to reach, and what's the company goal in general. Number 2 is then you go through these steps. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Not always in sequence, but you can kind of start with the sequence once. With number 2 being you look at what's currently out there. Like what are your users currently doing with the product that you have out there? And can you change something there to increase a goal or reach a goal already? But making sure that you know exactly what's happening out there. And then number 3 is like bringing 1 and 2 together and making sure that you define the first next little step towards number 1. And by doing 4, this is actually where the work happens. You experiment towards this first little goal with different kind of methods. So if you have a product discovery structure, it should be way easier to run the product discovery also continuous. And it's called continuous product discovery, but I think it's still one of the 6 pillars that is super important, because if you're not making time within your week or within your day to actually have these meetings, and I'm sharing some screenshots from my time at N26, we had feedback sessions, we had stand-up where, like the same as we had stand-up every day, we probably had feedback session every week, or user interviews are being set up. As you can see on the top left, there was a session we had every week on a Monday morning, where Josh on the bottom right is sharing user research with a couple of designers, with a couple of product people. But it happened regularly. You need to make sure that these kind of things are happening, even if you're remote, like on the bottom left, for example, since with Corona, we were at one point doing the same thing remote, where we looked at numbers together and defined what findings did we see in the last week. And by having this in a recurring basis and continuous, you always kind of trigger those questions. What I also found super helpful, and that's the bottom right image, is if you create a habit around interviewing users or getting feedback on a continuous basis, it's not something that you need to set up like a long time, but rather it happens naturally. But the first thing is, and that's the second pillar, is it needs to be continuous, and we need to make time for it. I mentioned it already, like it helps if the things are coming in a flow. So automating the product discovery helps a lot. And by automating, I mean doing little things next to the bigger things. Like you can still do a 5 days design sprint. Like there's nothing wrong with that if you want to deep dive into something. But having something continuously automated that you get feedback or kind of the vibe that's going on within your product area on an automated and continuous basis, that helped us a lot. So in the third pillar, I would like to share one example with Beyond, where we currently have a waiting list. So by the way, if you want to find out more, go to our website, beyond.so, join the waiting list if you want to get to the public beta at one point. To the internal beta at one point. But what we're doing here is we want to learn who is actually our target audience, because a lot of people could put in their email address into the waiting list, and we would probably never learn anything about these people. So what we're doing is we're asking for their feedback in the right context. So if they fill out the email field and join the waiting list, we're sending them a type form right after, where they can give us a bit of information. And every time someone fills out this type form, the team gets back a Slack notification, and everything is automated. And I looked it up just before I started the talk. I did get 20, 30 Slack messages of people really giving us new insights into who could become our target audience at one point just today. If we would not have that, we probably would miss out on a lot of super interesting insights. So making stuff automated helps a lot by just discovering on the side, I would call it. The fourth way is efficient. Like discovery needs to be efficient. I hear a lot that teams are not doing product discovery, or they're not getting the buy-in from their leadership because it's too expensive. In most cases, it's only available to the product like the insights are only available to product managers or the marketing team. So it really needs to be efficient in the sense of how you can create new insights. And by being efficient, I mean choose the right method. Not everything needs to be an A/B test that needs to go in front of real users. A lot of times we're starting with the method and then we're deciding on what to find out, but rather turn it around. Like, what do you want to find out? And then look at the pages that have all these methods described and see which one is probably the easiest and most, or the cheapest for you in terms of time or money, to validate what you actually want to find out. Another thing that helped us a lot is every time you need to code something, or if you need to put something into delivery and put it in front of real users, it's expensive. It's more expensive as if you would just call someone, or when it comes to UX, in most cases, 5 to 7 people find all the usability flaws. You don't need to put that in front of real users. So always, the earlier you can validate something, the better and the more efficient it is. And third, and that's probably for the startups, if some people are working in startups listening, there's always a free option in most of the tools where you can start using their product for free until you make money with your own company. It's always a good option to choose the free tier. There are quite a lot of good players out there now at the moment. With no-code tools coming up, you can almost do everything without writing one line of code. From finding users to putting them in a user interview pool, to inviting them, to scheduling the meeting, to talking to them via video, and then also all the way to getting their insights and making sense out of them. Usually there is a tool for that. The fifth one, which I personally find super interesting, and we heard that before from Roman, like it's a team sport. Like Agile is working together with a team, working together with developers and designers on a daily basis. So make insights accessible. Like if they're not accessible to everyone in the team, they're useless. Like if it's only in your head, they don't really help the others. So make sure that you have insights, if you generate them, available to everyone. So what we did at N26, for example, because it was rather complex, a banking app in 25 different markets with 25 or almost 25 different ways of how stuff worked, we just screenshotted everything in the beginning to make sure that everybody knows how it looks in a different market on a iOS or Android device, how it looks in web. The next step, which I didn't show here, but the next step was then to also put numbers next to it, like how is it performing? Making things visual and document stuff helps a lot. And even if you're not going back and look at these things on a daily basis, if you're doing it already on a weekly or monthly basis, it helps a lot to bring people together. Or if new people join, they have a nice documentation where they can rather start soon within their new job to understand how everything is connected. Another thing that we are currently doing at Beyond quite a lot is, again, talking to users, trying to understand who is our target group. So as soon as we're hiring new people, I want to make sure that they benefit from the work we're doing at the moment. So we're putting together every user interview that we're doing, every experiment that we're running. I want to make sure that they can go back and read through what the people said, what were our insights. So again, that they can start not from the very beginning, but that they can at least get an overview. And if you're making sure that these kind of things are happening on a weekly basis and people document things or document their experiments, it helps probably your successor, or it helps another team to understand why you have chosen a different path, or why you have chosen to build something in a specific way. And then the third thing, and again, that's from Beyond, if you have findings and learnings, or during an experiment is running, make it visible. Show the people what's currently happening out there. We saw it with the product kata. That was one of the big parts. Like, people need to understand how is the product being used. They need to see how, like, where are the biggest problems. And just by giving them access to these dashboards, in a way that they can play with them themselves usually helps already a lot. And then the sixth and probably the most important pillar is product discovery is human, and sometimes we forget about that. We're, as Roman said, we're somehow tricked into using a specific tool, but in the end, we just want to learn something about other humans and what their desires and what their problems are and how we can best solve them. And if you then bring all of it together, like you as a product person, you're probably somewhere in the middle of that. And you need to make sure that these kind of discussions are happening, that these kind of meetings are happening, that the user researcher has everything they need, or that they are able to share with the product group. So if you're just looking at the top left picture, that was my team at N26, and there's QE, there is an engineer, there's designers, there's user researchers, there's a data analyst, there is a marketing person. Like, bring them all into the same room and let them talk to each other and let them talk to users if possible. And by facilitating these kind of communications, it's not always just that you're in the center, but you kind of bring people closer to being able to make decisions themselves, but informed decisions. And Intercom is always talking about product sense and how important it is for product people, but I would even argue that product sense should be important in everyone in the team. And by allowing people to be part of it, be part of the product discovery, even if they're a developer, like, bring them in. They need to talk to users. They need to see what the problems are, because it's very human what they're building in the end. You can have a big portion into making the product better and making the working relation better with the people within your team or stakeholders. So in a nutshell, the 6 pillars that I saw is structuring your product discovery, make it continuous, make it automated in the ways that are possible next to the bigger discoveries that you're doing. Making product discovery efficient always helps. Arguing with stakeholders or with upper management if they're not really on board. Making it accessible for team members, but everyone who wants to or has an interest in the findings. And the most important one, product discovery needs to be human. So the key learnings I saw in the last 4 years that are somehow connected to the 6 pillars, but if you're remembering something for the talk, hopefully it's those 4 things. Transparency is always key. If you're working in a team, make sure that everybody has the same kind of information. By visualizing as much as possible, you can make that happen easily, because sometimes, and we heard that earlier again, OKRs might be quite text heavy. So visualize them in a different way so everybody understands them. And there is no need to read through it, but it's a chart or something. Strengthen your product sense, but also strengthen the product sense of the people around you. And then remember, it's all about people. And one last thing, since I said it in the beginning, we're building Beyond, and Beyond is coming from a problem I was facing quite a lot. Also researching for that talk. There is so much content out there, and just today on World ProductTank, I think there are like 30 or 40 or even more talks happening that are now somewhere in YouTube, and you probably won't see all of them, but there might be super interesting things in some of the product tanks that you're missing out. So what we're currently building is Beyond. And if you want to see it in action, I put together, or I curated some of the articles I found in my research or things I'm using on a weekly or daily basis, and put it in a collection that we just released last week. Feel free to scan the QR code or go to that URL, and you can see all the articles or YouTube videos I was referring to or I was using during the talk. I'm more than happy to get any feedback on Beyond as well. Or as I said before, if you have questions or you just want to have a chat, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. And that's pretty much it. Looking forward to your questions now. I think you're muted, Seema, if you're talking already.
Yes, sorry, the typical issue. Thank you so much. It was really super interesting. I took a lot of notes. I have a couple of questions before we go to the audience. So my number one question is that you said you have like weekly feedback sessions in which you review the opportunities that you have, right? I do feel like that could be quite valid if you have depending on at which stage of the product life cycle you are at, you might have a lot of those opportunities or new findings that you would like to review. Or if you're working with like some internal tools and your product is kind of mature, you might have fewer of those opportunities out there. So what was your experience? How did you balance that out? And how often did you used to like, if you didn't have any new opportunity, at least, would you still go and have that discussion to make sure if it's still valid or not?
Yeah, no, good question. I think it doesn't start at the opportunities, but it rather starts at like, what's the goal you want to reach? What's the objective you want to reach? And even if you're quite restricted in the way of how your team's purpose is or what you're working on, you still should get a goal at one point from like your boss or from you create your own goals. Like we heard that earlier, which totally makes sense. And then based on that, you can do an initial discovery if you have no ideas what potential opportunities are. Like I said, like doing a design sprint for a couple of days or using methods from a design sprint to understand what is the opportunity space we're dealing with, by understanding what's the problem space we're dealing with. It's a good way. And I think if you're not even coming up with one or two opportunities on how to make things better, there's probably a bigger problem than the opportunities. So that's why it's also a tree structure. Like there might be bigger opportunities where you need other teams to collaborate with you. There might be smaller opportunities that your team completely can do by themselves. But if you're using like planning tools like OKRs, those opportunities or the opportunity solution tree, that should stay for a couple of months. It's not that you're changing that opportunity tree every sprint or every quarter. Like the one I was building for N26, that was kind of a rolling opportunity solution tree where we had things in there that were still being validated from quarter one, but we are already in quarter two. So we saw some numbers coming in. We were actually working on opportunities from quarter two to then afterwards picking up on the Q1 opportunities again, but by visualizing what you're actually, what's in not only in focus at the moment, but what's in the area of your team at the moment, it helps a lot to not forget about things or just have this very focused quarter thinking of, yes, we need to reach those OKRs in the next 3 months, and then we're doing something completely different. And yes, I would say having these meetings on at least 2 weekly basis to talk a bit with your team, a bit like what has happened the last 2 weeks, what is happening the next 2 weeks, might be a bit too short term. I was always using Kanban instead of sprints. So if you want to do it on a monthly basis or even on a 2-month basis, but these meetings should happen. Yes, I would say so.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Just out of curiosity, who used to do this documentation? Because based on my experience, usually teams are a bit against doing documentation.
I
would say you as a product manager, or it was like a collaborative effort?
No, it was a collaboration. So I gave the structure, and at that point I bonded with our quality engineer, and she was super helpful in putting all screenshots together, making sure that we have every different use case. In a lot of teams, if you're using QA tools where you can automatically generate screenshots, that helps a lot. If you don't have that, but you maybe have like innovation days or something, that's where we build it. So we used like 3 days of innovation days to just go through the whole thing and screenshot everything and document it. It might be like a lot of work at one point, but it paid off like even months after. So
awesome, thank you so much. We have a question from Marieke. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations for doing discovery in a team that does not directly work with users?
Great question, Marieke, and hi, we know each other.
Okay.
So I think, and I said it before, discovery doesn't need to be only learning things about users. Like, it could be that you're learning about new things about the business. It could be you're learning new things about your technical restrictions. So what we always did is also making technical spikes, for example, part of a discovery. Like, you don't want to only talk to users. And the question I would then have is like, who is in the end using what you're building? And you can talk to their people. If it's only another kind of technical tool that is using your solution, it's probably that you're discovering a lot in technical restrictions area or something like this. Personally, I always had products in the B2C area, so I'm probably not the best one answering that question. But yeah, the only thing I can say is make sure that you're not only talking to users and see this as a proper discovery, because there is so much more to having a discovery if you also being able to discover in other areas like the business or the tech area. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it actually helps a lot. I totally agree with you. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the product. It could be different areas of opportunities. Moving on to, actually, let's see. I think, yes, Christoph. He's asking, with just continuous discovery, are you believing in bigger jumps or changes? How do you approach this?
Also a good question, and I'm hoping that let me frame it differently. I think there is the potential that you're only micro improving your product if you're only looking inside of your team of what the potential opportunities are. So what we were doing, for example, at N26 is having these opportunity solution trees not only on a team basis, but also having them on a group basis with 4 teams, where you see different opportunities, where you discover bigger opportunities, where probably 2 teams need to collaborate. We didn't manage to get it even higher than that, but I believe that if they're doing it on a C-level or company area in terms of looking a bit more ahead, like what's the North Star this company is following, it's just another outcome, or it's just another goal that you can put on top of this opportunity solution tree, for example, and then you can still run continuous discovery. And as I said, it should be a balance between bigger discovery portions. So doing time box discovery is not totally wrong, or doing it, but what's wrong is only doing time box discovery. So if you're having a bigger new topic coming up, or you're having a big feature or a big product, like there is nothing wrong with putting away your team for a few days and like nailing the discovery work on a specific feature, but it shouldn't stop after. It should continue during the delivery and while you're identifying new things that you can put on your backlog. I hope that helps.
Yes, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. It's a continuous work that can never be done, actually. It's, as you put it, I liked it that we need to keep doing it. Even when we hit the target, we have to find new targets and new opportunities. That's how we improve the product in that sense.
Yeah.
Great, Alexander. We don't have any other questions here. Sure, absolutely. Please go ahead.
I'm seeing this one comment by Mareike, and I would like to comment on it, because if she's writing, the one from Mareike, exactly, it's very often about, this one. Exactly. If it's like internal tools of a company, there can still discovery happen. And for example, one of the graphs I was showing was a driver tree we were building, and this driver tree, you don't need to talk to users because you're mainly looking at numbers, because you have the drivers and you have a goal that you want to reach, and by filling out the drivers that either make or break that goal. So giving an easy example, on a football club wants to sell 100 tickets, and the drivers would be the price of the ticket, and they want to make a specific amount of money. That's the goal. They either can change the price or they can sell more tickets. That would be the two drivers. And by looking at that, you can identify like how, and that would be an internal product discovery, or for an internal tool, like just looking at the numbers, looking at the tickets price or the ticket quantity. You identify those two levers that you can change to increase or decrease the goal. You don't need to talk to the fans, but it would still be a piece of product discovery on how is the goal actually set up. And by identifying all the drivers, for example, you can play around with it and you can change it. So there are methods that you can use to put it together. There are methods that you can use where you're not talking to users, which are probably more like data related, but that are also within product discovery, and that could also happen in a continuous product discovery, which should also fall into the 6 pillars.
Sure, absolutely. And I'll make sure to check out on Beyond.so, is it? Yeah, because does it produce some sort of curated content based on the interests of the person, or how does it work? Because I do have this problem of being overloaded or bombarded with a load of information on a daily basis. I'm looking for some ways to kind of organize those around the...
That's perfect, because then you're within our target group, and I can share a bit something. So we have started 2 months ago, and what you currently can do in the beta is exactly that you capture the content that you find outside or on the platform. You can put it in a workflow. So we always call it a bit like Pocket on steroids, because you can track your consumption. You can see what you have already consumed. You can search again for things, because, for example, I always had a folder in Chrome that was called Read Later, and I never read it later. So that's one of the problems we're trying to solve. And then the more important thing for us at the moment is that you're able to kind of recommend these kind of content items to others. So you're having a profile, you can build collections and lists with different pieces of content, but you can also discover the recommendations by others. And as I said earlier, feel free to check it out. The picture I shared of the QR code is one of the curated collections. And also we're in the very beginning, but we want to make great tools for exactly solving the problem you just described.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it, Alexander. And thanks everyone for attending this meetup, the World Product Day. We don't have any more questions, so I would like to just thank everyone again and have a lovely time ahead. Stay safe, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.